What's going on, guys? It's Bromley at Empire Barbell, and today we're going to talk about my least favorite subject, and that is bench pressing. Now, as a strong man, I found it very easy to talk myself out of benching for so many years. There was a myth that goes around that benching isn't really relevant or it's just an accessory to strongman, and those people are wrong, and I found that out the hard way by taking that advice to heart early on and getting a lot of years of no development in my bench. Even as my overhead press got very good, I found that I didn't have the crushing capacity to really handle big stones or heavy sandbags, and it set me back for a lot of years. I've also had a run of shoulder injuries from being a little overeager in my teen years, and those can still cause problems today if I'm not careful. So trying to condense benching and aggressive overhead pressing in the same block, I find can be problematic if I'm not careful. So for that reason, I just avoided benching for a lot of years. Now, I've talked in the past how when I did bench in my teens, I had a really exaggerated, very narrow grip, very high arch, very reduced range of motion bench, because that's what all the cool kids were doing in powerlifting at the time. And I found that that got me nowhere developmentally, even as I was able to handle heavier and heavier loads. So then I went back to a more relaxed bodybuilding style approach where my elbows were a little more flared. I was coming more to my mid chest, and I found that was really good developmentally. I grew a lot of muscle doing that, but it became very problematic as the weight got heavier, especially in the context of all the overhead pressing I was doing. I found that having my elbow flared, creating all this passive tension, just turning my pec into a trampoline by pulling it tight, was really a cheap way of moving weight. So the extra range of motion was good, but as a means of moving really heavy loads under control, it wasn't good enough, and I was really enduring a lot of shoulder pain. So I knew I had to go back to the drawing board. So this whole last year, I've had some killer bicep tendonitis act up in my shoulders. I had to put my overhead pressing on the back burner, and I wasn't able to do any really heavy type of pressing. So coming back to it, I decided that I needed to kind of rebuild a base, find a setup and an approach that was tenable, that would allow me to train without making these issues worse. In fact, I needed something that would actually help the issues and grow me and get me stronger so I could progress further down the road. So I'm gonna go over 3 things I did with my bench press specifically that led to me getting stronger and actually my shoulders feeling better, and how that's gonna play out into what I'm gonna do the rest of the year. So the first couple of things are gonna be technical in nature, because I had to go back and kind of retweak my setup periodically when the same type of thing was causing overuse issues and I wasn't getting anywhere. So thing number 1 is the elbow tuck. Now, with the really exaggerated, really narrow, high arch, straight line push, I did have a good amount of tuck in my elbows, but the range of motion was so reduced that it just really failed as a developmental exercise. It just stopped being useful to what I was doing. When I did go back to a type of elbow tuck when I wasn't in such an aggressive setup, I had a hard time feeling strong. I had a hard time feeling tight at the bottom, and it actually felt a little worse on my shoulders. The reason for that is I was trying to go too heavy too soon. I didn't take the time to build my base with this setup, and that's something that I realized down the road. What the elbow tuck does, by keeping the elbows close to your side, well, it does a few things. For one, it keeps your pectoral short. When you flare your elbow out, this kind of bodybuilding style bench press approach, you're stretching the chest to a more fuller range of motion. But with heavier weight, we're using passive tension. It's just pulling your pectoral tight and using that to create artificial compression at the bottom to help you on the way up. So the range of motion is good developmentally, but relying on the pec to be fully stretched to get that type of tension at the bottom, not great for your shoulders, not great for moving a lot of weight. And it actually correlated to a lot of the pec injuries I would get. I would be prone to small tears when I got heavy with that type of bench setup. So it's not something I would recommend. So keeping the elbow in tight keeps the pectoral close, keeps it shorter. So that shortness means it's going to be in a stronger position, and it means you're not going to be exposing that pec insertion to unnecessary strain that's going to lead to a tear. It also allows you to use your lat. You've heard about people say using your lat when you bench press. So the lat actually creates this kind of roadblock as you're coming down. And if you get good at that maneuver, you can create a ton of compression. That compression makes your bench more efficient off your chest, but it's also going to aid your shoulders. It's going to kind of reduce the impact of benching on your shoulder joint, because it's not just about what the main movers are doing in the front. It's about how much support you're getting all the way through the range of motion. So it's not just a cheap trick to move more weight, it's actually a very viable way of keeping your shoulders healthy. Now the lats don't actually contract to move the bar forward, but they do contract to create resistance. So the one way I visualize it, I almost think of a straight arm pull down. If you're standing for the lat pull down and you're keeping your arms straight, you should notice that as you squeeze your lats and you pull your shoulder blades in, you should feel a point of resistance. That point of resistance represents the compression that's helping support you at the bottom. And that's what we're digging into. So Scott Mendelson actually had a video, and I hate to give Scott Mendelson credit for anything. One of the best benchers of all time, but he's hard to listen to sometimes. But one of the cues that he gave was as he comes down, he thinks about connecting his arm to his lat so that as you pull down, you're pulling into that tension. So physically, the barbell is prevented from coming down. And as you warm up, that's something you're thinking about. You're like, how much resistance can I get from my back to prevent the bar from coming down, even though I'm trying to pull it down where gravity's forcing it down. So once I got that dialed in, my shoulders felt better, but I felt infinitely more stable right off my chest. So that was a big one. So it's not just tucking them. Don't just tuck them for the sake of tucking them. Figure out how to actually use your lats. And once you figure that out, that's going to be more incentive for you to actually do your damn rows and build your back up. And that by itself is going to lead to another surge in bench pressing ability. The last thing it does is it relies more so on my triceps and my front delt. So as I tuck my elbows, I feel myself load into my triceps. So I got a lot more receptivity from those muscle groups for how they contribute. Also, my shoulders are proportionately a lot stronger than anything else because I do so much overhead pressing around. And tucking my elbows relies a lot on the tension of the front delt, so it plays into one of my strengths. So top to bottom, it appears to be a better approach, specifically for me. The movement of the shoulder joint's a lot easier. It works around a lot of my shoulder injuries a lot better. It's a lot more intuitive to me now, and I've gotten some better development from it because I've been less hesitant to chase harder numbers or to build up more volume, because I didn't feel like I was running into that wall where I was going to get injured. So this checks a lot of boxes. This was a big one for me. So number 2 is the arc. Now I'm going to show you my bench press video in a minute and you're going to see me arcing. This is a big one that's been used. I mean, Kazmaier used to talk about ramping the bar back over his face. There's a lot of guys that talk about how bringing the bar back over your shoulders as you press is a much more efficient bar path. Now there's some controversy here because there's plenty of guys who, Westside talks about pressing in a straight line. I've seen coaches cue straight line bar paths and they'll cite physics or whatever. Shortest distance between 2 points is straight line. Yeah, but that doesn't say dick about what the system is doing to actually move into that straight line. Now, I am inclined to believe that there's enough people on both sides of the fence to just reinforce what I always say is you get good how you train. If you always bench in a straight line, that's where you're going to feel comfortable. Me personally, once I came down with my elbows tucked, using my lats, using my triceps and front delts more efficiently, building up all that compression, I found that by pushing the bar up, if the bar's right here, then I have this moment arm relative to my shoulder. That's a pretty long moment arm right there if that's where the bar finishes. Leverage tells you that horizontally, wherever the load is relative to the main pivot point, which is our shoulders, the further that distance is, the worse your leverage is. So if you're in this position and you tuck your elbows and you push straight, all of a sudden I have this moment arm between my shoulders and the weight, whereas I'm actually strongest when the bar is stacked directly over my shoulders. So if you end up in a hard lift and you're trying to grind, every single inch that you move that bar back to your shoulders puts you in a stronger and stronger and stronger position, and that becomes your best bet at completing a really sticky lift. So if we're tucking here, one of the cues we use is to flare the elbows. You think about you're low on your chest, you're even below your rib cage sometimes. So as you push up, flaring the elbows brings that bar back over your shoulders. Now, I actually don't think so much about flaring. I actually think about doing like a front raise type motion. And I've heard Kazmaier talk about this. Talks about doing front raises with the 100-pound dumbbells. So when he's loaded up with a big bench, the motion is very similar to that front delt raise as he gets the bar back over his face. So that ramping action, it increases leverage. It makes for a much smoother stroke. I'll show you might be able to see on a couple of these reps that you can see the bar arcs back over my face a little bit. Now that's something, takes a little while to dial in. I think it's worth incorporating to your lighter sets. Cycling through reps quickly. If you're doing a set of 10 or something, you can get thrown off a little bit because going straight up and down is a lot more simple. It's conceptually a lot easier to pull off than having to load in tight, get back over your head, and then reversing direction back in. It's easy to cycle through that a little too quickly, get thrown off. So really take them one by one. I want you to feel how smooth and efficient that arc is when you hit it right. You should feel at this midpoint that, oh my God, I'm so strong having brought the bar back a little bit, that if all I do is just bring it back a little more, it's like my elbows seem to lock out automatically. And that's been my experience. Again, that's built a lot of confidence in my bench press. This has made up for what I perceived as a lockout weakness, that it actually wasn't so much a lockout weakness, it was just worse patterning. And I found that my performance improved quite a bit pretty quickly when I started applying this. Number 3, and any of you who are not new to my channel, this is not going to be new to you because I harp on this all the time, build your damn base. The wider your base is, the taller your ceiling is. If you over specialize with strength specific work, you're going to be trying to chase progress that you haven't earned yet. For your bench press, you need a well-rounded upper body. Benching by itself does not develop a well-rounded upper body. Benching by itself is not great for developing your lats, your rear delts, your traps, your rhomboids, your front delts. All of these are best suited with other exercises, or at least with a certain volume of training. So if you're chasing strength specificity just by going as heavy as you can, you are not going to be building your base. You're going to be playing in whatever limitations you have by virtue of your underdeveloped physique. The more you build your base, the better you're going to be. So to kind of play off that, what I've been doing, I haven't really benched in the last 1 to 2 years. I will throw in floor presses occasionally when I'm focused on my overhead press. But coming out of these last 2 meets, I had to prep for Worlds, and then I had to prep for the Arnold. So that was a solid 8 months of prep that I did pretty much no benching for. So coming back thinking that, okay, now I'm going to start putting my experience to use, and I'm going to see if I can find a way to train my bench press so I can sustainably grow and maybe do a powerlifting meet later on, or at least fix some of the weaknesses of my shoulders. I thought, okay, I got to get my technique dialed in so I don't play into the shoulder issues that I have. But I also have to find a threshold I can work in, because if I go too heavy too soon, I'm going to run into those same problems and I'm going to get frustrated. So coming back, I mean, my shoulders are strong because I do overhead press year round, and shoulder pressing is a huge asset to benching. There's a lot of people that lag on their shoulder work. You could be a very good bencher from all the benching you do and have very weak shoulders. Anybody who has strong shoulders from regular overhead pressing will be a pretty good bench presser just by virtue of that. So I go into benching, even when I don't train it, with my bench pretty good. Starting out, I was trying to dial in these new technical points, so I stayed light. I stayed with 10s, and they were easy 10s. And I let the amount of work I was doing drive my progress. So I started, I want to say 3 sets of 10 with like 245. There's high school freshmen that can do that. I didn't rush it. I didn't chase weight each week. I just added a set and bumped the weight up a little bit. Not even so that it was a PR, just so it was a little more weight than I had done the week before. As the weight got to a certain point, I dropped to 8s and I repeated the cycle, and I kept inching the weight up. Again, nothing getting remotely close to failure, just accruing volume over time. And what I found is that each week, as I handled the volume better, as I recovered better, and as I lasted into later sets, I also found that my technique was getting reinforced. I was more efficient, I wasn't wasting as much energy on each set, and it felt a lot more intuitive. So that's what all this base building does. Muscle is growing, capacity was growing, technique was improving, and that's what we go for with our base. The base is so important for something like the bench press, and that is evident by the fact that there are so many very, very elite benchers that are not specialists in the sense that they specialize specifically for strength. You're talking about a lot of guys who are pretty much all base. You're looking at guys who are physique guys or bodybuilders, guys who just tried to accrue as much mass as possible and ended up accidentally becoming insane benchers. Eric Spada was a gym rat. You get guys like Ronnie Coleman, Johnny Jackson, Stan Efferding. The lion's share of their development over the years didn't come from strength-specific training. It came from all of these decades of bodybuilding work that grew these very impressive physiques, and they developed a very good bench press because of it. So even if you're not trying to be a mass monster, the wider your base is now, the better your peak is going to go down the road. I'm looking to a very, very substantial strength-specific peak way at the end of this year. So for the next 4 or 5 months, I'm just base building. I'm just running through the volume phases, recycling through them. I'm progressing very evenly. I'm not adding weight until I know I can handle that weight. And that has been a game changer. By the time I got into the low 300 range, which is typically where my working strength sets are, I had already been about 5 weeks in, and I felt fantastic because I put in the work with the lighter weight to add enough mass, dial in my technique, and make sure that I was sidestepping all of those issues that I ran in the past. So I cannot stress enough, build your base. Stop trying to run heavier, heavier, heavier. Try to learn how to make lighter weights work for you. Try to learn how to make the working sets work for you. Add to the amount of work you're doing each week. Don't just blindly throw weight on the bar, cross your fingers, and hope that you're gonna get stronger week out. The best possible example I can give to reinforce this is the fact that my all-time best bench press ever is a 425 I did in a powerlifting meet about 5 years ago. It was the one and only meet I did, and that was back when I didn't like benching very much, and I just sucked it up and went through a really shitty prep, and I squeezed out a 425 bench press. At this point, I did 365 for 9 reps yesterday, and I have not gone below 5 reps for any of my training splits so far, meaning I haven't done really any triples, doubles, or singles. Right now, if I had to guess based on past performances, my max is probably around a 475, 485 right now. I am very hopeful that by the end of my strength cycle later this year, I will be in the low mid 500 pound range, assuming that I stay in one piece. I feel pretty good about that right now. But this is a testament to how just growing your base, it creates such substantial growth that it eventually usurps your old numbers. So by the time I get to 425, it's going to be working sets of 5 across, and I'm going to know that I'm slated for a very big number down the road when I do get to that specialization phase. But the specialization phase is not the bread and butter. The volume, the base, that is the bread and butter. That's what you should be on. So those are 3 things I did to really overhaul my bench press. Shoulders are feeling good, weights moving good. Hopeful for a big number at a meet into this year, beginning next year. We'll see how it goes. I'll keep you guys posted. If you have any questions, anything I didn't cover, anything you want clarified, go ahead and leave it in the comment box or start a thread on the forum, empire-forum.com. Thanks for watching, guys. Until next time, this is Bromley at Empire Barbell. I'll see you.